So the outcomes for today is for you to be able to understand the self-concept, and then to understand how things like your self-confidence, your self-image, and your self-esteem is linked to your self-concept, right? Understand why you may have no self-confidence or why you have low self-esteem. I don't promise to have all of the answers, but perhaps through the slides, something may trigger for you, and you may then understand yourself. When you understand yourself, you can spring into action to do something about it, right? I will also spend a little bit of time exploring some of the causes of low self-esteem, and then I'm going to end off with tips on how to build your self-esteem and your self-confidence. Now, before we start, I want you to write down 5 words that you use to describe yourself, just on your phone maybe, or on a piece of paper next to you. I'd like you to find 5 words that you often say to yourself. Oh, I am so-and-so, and I am very hardworking, I'm kind, I'm caring, whatever. Just write down 5 words to describe yourself. If you can't find 5, write down as many as you can. Doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, just write it down. I'll give you a few seconds for that.
Can they use a chat box to do that, Sharifa, as well, in case they don't have any piece of paper next to them?
Well, they can keep it in their mind. I don't want other people to know what they think.
All right. No problem.
It's a self-exercise. Okay. Because there's 3 parts, another 2 parts to this exercise. So it's 3 parts in total. All right, so I'm going to continue then. So do you think that self-esteem and self-confidence are the same things? Now, some people use those words interchangeably, but firstly, before you know what the self-concept is, you need to understand some things like what the real self is and what the ideal self. The real self is who we actually are. When no one's looking, that's our real self. One of the psychology theorists talk about the true self and the false self, right? So the real self is actually the true self, right? And the false self would be a self that we want to hide from others, but I don't want to get into that here. I want to delineate between the real self, who we actually are, who we think we are when we look in the mirror, right? Because that real self is our own self-image, right? Because we don't know, there's no way of us knowing how others view us. It's what we think, or how we think they view us. Then the ideal self is who you actually want to be. As you can see here, the self-concept is made up of self-image, self-worth, and the ideal self. So the ideal self, this comprises of all your desires, your hopes, your wishes. These are all the things you want to be. As you can see, there's a little cat there. He's looking in the mirror and he sees a lion, right? So the self-concept is made up of these 3 concepts here: the self-image, the self-worth, and the ideal self, right? The self-concept, this is an overall perception of the self. Self-esteem, on the other hand, is the person's perception of their own worth, right? And so how you feel about yourself or how you value yourself ties in with yourself, how you value yourself. The other thing you need to understand about self-concept is that it's very comprehensive. It's an evaluation of yourself, right? And so if you hold yourself to a particular value, you're also going to think and feel about yourself in a particular way, right? And the self-image, really, if I can put it this way, is like a mental image that you have in your mind about who you are. Your thoughts and your feelings, your personality and all of that, your thoughts and your feelings lie with the self-concept, but your personality and your attributes, your abilities, all of that lies in your self-image. So you know how you get people that are suffer from eating disorders, the people that are anorexic. We often think, how is it that someone that's so thin, so skinny already, will still look in the mirror and look at themselves and say, I'm too fat? It's because of a distorted body image. So the self-image includes physical attributes, how you see yourself physically, but also how you see yourself as a human being in terms of your personality, right? Your persona. Right? Here we go. The self-concept, we know there are several causative factors, but the 2 that I think that are important, I'm not so interested in the biological factors, but I think the environmental factors which is part of which includes your interaction with other people. I think that contributes greatly to how people view themselves, how they value themselves, how they judge themselves. Your self-concept will develop throughout your entire life. You might find in primary school, you were somebody that had a very low self-esteem. You didn't think much of yourself, and maybe that had to do with all of your childhood experiences. And the environmental factors we talk about is all of your interactions with all of the significant people in your life. This includes, most importantly, your parents, firstly, then aunts and cousins and friends at school. The things they said to you are things that you have internalized, that you've integrated, and that has become your self-concept, all right? And so if you don't value yourself, if you don't see yourself as somebody that is, let's say, kind, or somebody that is intelligent, or somebody that is good looking, those have come from things that, or interactions, or what we call introjects, that you have picked up along the way throughout your life. Those are just two pictures there. And of course, lastly, I just want to mention that both the self-concept and the self-image, self-confidence, all of that is very, very subjective. So let's just look here. Okay, so Rogers talks about how the self-image, self-esteem, and the ideal self makes up the self-concept. Remember that you can have both positive and negative evaluations of yourself. It doesn't necessarily have to be only negative. Some people can say good things about themselves, or they evaluate themselves in a very positive way some of the time, and then other times they'll put themselves a lot. If you think about your exams, when you don't do well in an exam, you immediately will say, I was so stupid, I should have put that answer. Or I'm so stupid, I shouldn't have answered in that way, right? You qualified with some kind of negative evaluation about yourself, right? But like the self-concept, our self-esteem varies, like I said, across context and across our lifespan. You may do very well in the next exam, and then you would feel very good about yourself, and then your self-esteem is lifted. So you can see there's a flexibility there, which means that if you do more of the positive stuff, if you say more of the positive stuff, or if you reframe what you have to say, and I'll get into that later on, your self-esteem has the ability to wax and wane because it is flexible. A negative evaluation of any kind of characteristic that isn't very important for our self-concept it will not result in us losing our self-esteem. Do you understand what that means? If you have a negative evaluation of any kind of characteristic, but if it's not important to you, if it's not important for your self-concept, it's not going to affect your self-esteem. In order to allow for a healthy self-worth, it's important that you interact with fully functioning individuals who help you to strive towards self-actualization. Most of you may have heard about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Esteem needs are one of the needs that we have as human beings. And Maslow talks about our need to strive for self-actualization, right? So when you have a healthy self-worth, I mean, you surround yourself by people who boost your esteem, who makes you feel worthy of a compliment, for example. It pushes you more and more to becoming a more healthy individual, a fully functioning individual, who's then striving for the self-actualization. So how does the self-concept influence self-confidence, right? So think about this. If the self-concept refers to the overall idea of who a person thinks he or she is, right? And our self-esteem is based on our self-judgment. What does this mean? It means that our self-confidence is influenced by our self-concept, isn't it? And our self-esteem. That's what it actually means, right? Just read that. If your self-concept refers to the overall idea of who a person thinks he or she is, and your self-esteem is based on your own self-judgment, it means that your self-confidence and your self-esteem is influenced by your self-concept, right? When you judge yourself, right, when you say bad things to yourself, it affects your communication, it affects your behavior. But remember, sometimes when we say something to ourselves, it's about something negative, that is, it's about teaching ourselves a lesson. It doesn't mean that it's going to carry the same weight as a negative evaluation that's not true. Sometimes we tend to take in a negative view of ourselves based on very little evidence, based on hearsay, based on things that are happening in our own mind. And when you judge yourself, you tend to compare yourself to others. Think about social media. what is happening these days? People go on social media. They put up a post. Nobody likes the post. Immediately they start thinking, nobody likes me. Nobody on my friends list likes me, right? But what happens when you make that value judgment is that it gets incorporated into your self-concept, right? How you see yourself. Remember, the self-concept is made up of your self-image, your self-worth, your self-esteem, all of that, right? For example, when you judge yourself, when you judge yourself as less intelligent, for example, right, than say your friend or your sister, right, or you're less attractive than somebody else, you start incorporating that value judgment in your mind, which then becomes part of your self-concept, right? It's not a bad thing when you try and compare yourself to other people, right? But it also is, you think about who your reference group is, meaning who is your peer group? Who are the people that you are hanging around with? Who are you actually comparing yourself with? Sometimes we have very irrational, illogical social comparisons that we make. And there's no evidence to suggest that what we are thinking or believing is actually true, or what we're feeling is actually true. For example, if you receive a C or D on a particular paper, and you automatically assume, well, that means I'm stupid. That is an irrational way of thinking or perceiving something. It doesn't mean that you're stupid. It just means this time you maybe were not as well prepared, but look how you contribute towards the self-concept and indoctrinating yourself with all of this negativity. And I'm saying all of this for you so you can understand how over the years have I built up the low confidence, how I broke myself down, is what you need to start thinking. How have I broken myself down based on things that I've heard from others, based on assumptions I have made, and I've incorporated it, and it's now internalized, and it's become part of my self-concept, because that is influencing your self-confidence, right? Because when you question your academic abilities, anything, even if you question the way you look, your physical attributes, it will lead you to behave in ways that are consistent with your negative thoughts. Think about that, right? When you question or when you compare yourself to other people and you put yourself down, it will lead you to behave in that way. And so you start to believe your own negative thought, which may have no grounds, may have no reason to be true, but you will believe it. If you somebody your whole life have always received negative feedback, no matter how well you've done, and from people, some people grow up with stepmothers, let's say, and the stepmothers are not always kind to them, and the stepmother does things to them and says things to them. That child grows up believing those things because that's the only thing they know, right? Even if you do well, the person, because they don't like you and because they want you out of the way, they will say things to you. Think about when you're on a road and you're driving or you're walking and somebody you don't even know calls you a bad name. How terrible do you not feel, right? But that particular kind of incident that I'm relating to you goes much deeper than that stranger walking on the road calling you a bad name, right? So our negative thoughts tend to lead to negative behavior because this is a way of maintaining internal consistency, right? We're likely to act in a way that is congruent with our self-concept, right? Congruence means to match. You'll act in a way that matches your self-concept. So if you have a negative self-concept, you will likely behave in a way that matches that self-concept. Right? These two terms, and I'm just spending a little bit of time here, these two terms are often conflated, right? Now, I've said before that self-esteem has to do with how you value yourself as a person, right? And then self-confidence, of course, has to do with how your belief you have in yourself, right? And so when we use these terms, be careful. Self-confidence is a little bit slightly different, right, than self-esteem. So just be wary of this. But look at the last point about how both of these are important determinants to our career and human relationships. What does that mean? When you walk into an interview, right, if you're somebody that goes and give a very limp handshake, you don't make eye contact, you don't walk in a confident way. Remember, sometimes you may feel something, but physically, outwardly, overtly, you can project an image of self-confidence, and just in the way you walk, and just in the way you look at somebody, nod your head, shake their hand firmly, the way in which you say good morning and how you project your voice. will say this person has self-esteem. They don't know what you're feeling inside. You know what you're feeling inside, right? And I'm saying this so that you know, it doesn't matter if you have low self-confidence. That shouldn't stop you from going for an interview. It's how you project that, and practice that in a mirror. Practice walking in a confident way with your head slightly higher than you normally would, because some people slump, and that also can give off the impression that you have low self-confidence. You don't believe much in yourself. So imagine giving that impression off to a future employer. He's not going to want to take you on, right? And also in terms of your interactions with other people. If people are going to perceive you as somebody that's always down, pessimistic, you never have anything positive to say because you don't feel good about yourself, you don't feel good about the world, they're going to avoid you. What does that do? What did my previous slide say? If it's going to be if it's a way for you to maintain that congruency between your self-concept and the way you view yourself, right? Then you're going to act in that same way, isn't it? So be mindful of making that mistake of acting in tandem or congruent to how you view yourself. If you're somebody that's struggling with self-esteem issues or self-confidence issues, then do something about it so that you no longer behave in that same way, and that your behavior, your thoughts, and your feelings match each other, match the words that come out of your mouth and what you say. So some of the signs of low self-esteem include somebody who doesn't trust, somebody who compares themselves to other people when you feel like your life is totally out of control. The important one here, or the two important ones, I think, for me, are when you engage in people-pleasing behaviors. You know, you get those people who never say no for anything. They constantly want to serve others. Serving others is not a bad thing, but you do get people who, how can I put this, in a relationship, for example, if you're somebody that constantly people pleases, it means that your partner is going to end up taking advantage of you. And usually people pleasers are people who have very low self-esteem. They don't think much of themselves. They don't think they're worthy of being loved, for example. They don't feel they're worthy of being in a relationship. They don't feel worthy of anything. And so what they do to overcompensate is that they do everything the other partner says. And so even if your partner is treating you badly, you like wonder why some people stay in certain relationships. It's because of this underlying low self-esteem and no confidence to get out there and start a new relationship, right? Because they don't believe they have what it takes. And also some partners, unfortunately, may make you feel as though you're lucky I'm with you, nobody else would want you. And if in your relationship you've been subjected to constant badgering and emotional abuse, it will reinforce the need to engage in this people-pleasing behavior, right? Then the other one is boundaries. People who have low self-esteem and low self-confidence don't know how to do this. They don't know how to say no, for example. They don't know how to put boundaries where they are almost guarding their territory or making sure that people are not taking advantage of them. They don't know how to do that because, and like I said, these two are kind of linked with each other, right? So people pleasers have no boundaries. They just are, you know, and they just want to be able to feel good about themselves. And they think when they're doing things for you or for others, rather, they are, it makes them feel like a good person. It validates them, right? If they're not doing it, then they feel bad all the time. So it's difficult to pin down an exact definition of self-confidence because I think it's important to be able to trust your own judgment, your own capabilities, your own capacity, right? It's important to also have faith in yourself and to constantly reassure yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you must be habitual or, you know, or, how can I put it, anxious all the time about reassuring yourself. But when you've done something well, don't be afraid to be the first one to compliment yourself. Don't wait for someone else to come along and compliment you because they're not going to do that. And what happens is that low self-esteem stays where it is. It doesn't improve. So when you've achieved something, it doesn't matter what it is. If you've gone from a C to a B, or you've passed a module that you've taken 3 years to pass that module, don't say, I passed, yeah, but I took 3 years to do it. Just say, I passed this model eventually, you know, or I'm so glad I passed this module. Don't add the other stuff. Stop looking over your shoulder, because what does that do? It invites the past, which then, what's the word? Like not conflates, but it almost colors the present. It takes away from whatever's happening in the present, right? If you value yourself and if you feel worthy, you won't even look at your imperfections, right? But this starts with you doing something every single day. There's another slide that I have on here where I'll show you how you can actually do that. So if you're somebody that's coming into this workshop, or for your whole life, all you ever remembered is being somebody that was down on yourself, that exercise might help you, right? So, but none of us are perfect. Don't fool yourself by looking at somebody and think, gosh, she's so perfect. She's absolutely beautiful. There's nothing wrong with her. You don't know what's happening internally for that person. It's your perception that there's nothing imperfect about them, right? So the way you feel about yourself, either in relation to things you want to do or to your own persona, I think that's also for you to understand that this is how self-esteem is. It's just simply how you feel about yourself, right? And it doesn't matter whether it's things that you want to do, things you have done, or about your own personality. It's important for you to constantly do a mind check. I talk about the internal dialogue all the time. Watch what you say to yourself, and it's a real skill really to be in tune with yourself, to watch how you feed into your low self-esteem and your low self-confidence. And like I've said this also, sometimes you feel very, very confident in some situations, and then in other situations, you know, you feel the complete opposite. Let's do a quick recap here. So how you feel about your abilities. Poor self-confidence, when you doubt your abilities, right? When you say, I can't do it, I'm not smart enough to pass this module or degree, right? That's low self-confidence. Low self-esteem is how you feel about your outer self, right? When you constantly put yourself down, and you say things like, I'm not pretty, I'm not attractive, I'm so fat, all those kind of physical attributes have to do with your self-esteem, and that means you have a low self-esteem. So you might be able to recognize parts of yourself here. And so now I want you to do I've spoken a lot, so I want you to now just take a 30-second break almost. And I want you to write down 5 words that other people use to describe you. So the first part were words that you use to describe yourself. Now I want you to write down 5 words other people use to describe you. Again, it can be positive or negative. Okay, so just keep that one side. We're going to come to the third part of the exercise just now. And I want to, I think the next slide is on the causes. Yeah, okay, so I want to spend a little bit of time here. I think it's important to understand. Now, this is not a one size fits all. It doesn't mean that I've listed all of the causes here, but these are some of the causes that are kind of almost universal. It's based on research that has been done. And so hopefully, you know, you might identify, and if not, maybe your cause is lying somewhere else. But some of the main causes of low self-esteem are usually childhood adverse childhood experiences, right? And these experiences normally, they undermine your confidence. It actually has the power to change how you think of yourself. So, you know, there are children who go through you know, different adverse experiences like emotional abuse, maltreatment, neglect, physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, right? And so and also the other kind of abuse that is hidden that we don't see, when a parent is there but a parent doesn't see you. You know, the parents are only there to provide you with a roof over your head and 3 meals or 2 meals a day. It's a very mechanical way. They're very disconnected and detached from you. So they give you parental care and support, but it's not the kind of parental care and support that you need as a child, right? And it's a home that's filled with a lot of chaos, lots of fighting maybe, conflict and arguments, sometimes even a lot of aggression. You know, a lot of children get shaken in the morning. they get a hiding before they leave, or they've got to clean up the whole house before they leave, and they get screamed at, right? This increases your risk of developing a distorted self-concept, which leads to you feeling unworthy. So you can understand how then somebody goes into a relationship becoming a people pleaser, because their whole life, the very people that are supposed to give them the love withhold that love and give them love that is, conditional. If you clean the house, you'll get a smile or you'll get a biscuit. It's very conditional. Those kinds of kids go to school extremely unhappy. Then they go to school and then they have a teacher who also then picks on them. And then they have no friends in the playground, right? So imagine that kind of child who is feeling that way about themselves. They feel the whole world is against them. How does that child then start to believe in themselves? How does that child get rid of the irrational and illogical assumptions they make about themselves of being unlovable, for example, right? So when you have an unhappy childhood, right, when people like your teachers and your parents are extremely critical, it will cause you to have a low self-confidence. If you were in class and you did an oral, let's say as a primary school child, and everybody laughed at you, and you looked over to your teacher didn't defend you, but your teacher was also laughing maybe. Imagine what that does to your self-confidence. So those of you who may have these kinds of experience, maybe not to the extent that I'm saying, but you may have something similar. It'll help you to understand, so this is where my cause lies. This is why up to today, when I do any kind of public speaking, I'm shy, and my worst fear is that people are going to laugh at me, right? And I'm saying this also because we see this kind of thing on a regular basis, right? Also, if you were somebody that didn't perform well in school, right, you're not going to have the confidence because there was no one there to reassure you, and you didn't know any better. So there was no one there to reassure you that it's okay, you can try the next time. I love you regardless, I don't care about your marks. Your marks doesn't make you who you are. It's all the other qualities that make you who you are, and I love you for that. Some children are high achievers because they seek validation through their academic performance, right? So other things are like your ongoing stressful life events, relationship breakdowns. If you've had financial troubles, you will lose the confidence in yourself, right? So remember, this is such a sad picture of this little boy, right? Disapproving parents means what the slide actually means is, as children, we grow up. And all we want to do is gain the approval of our parents. We want to show them the pictures we've drawn or the little thing we made, whether it's a mud cake or whatever we've made. And we look to their faces, we look to their eyes, and we want to look for the care and the kindness and the nurturing, because that gives us a sense of security, right? And that sense of security means survival for us, right? So we look for that approval our whole life. If you don't get that kind of acknowledgement from your parents, you grow up constantly looking for approval, right? Fear-based teaching, right? Here is when you're in school and teachers inflict some kind of fear in you through the what's it, the cane, I think. I don't know what else they're using these days. Well, they don't. There's no corporal punishment, but there was a time when there was corporal punishment, and teachers would hit children. Even parents do that, in certain religions where they want you to learn a particular thing or believe in a particular thing. They will sit with the stick. It happens up to today, right? So out of fear of punishment, the child will do what they are supposed to do, right? And then when there's no clarity, it's made worse, right? Another thing that causes self-esteem issues and self-confidence issues is bullying at school. Remember, who are bullies? Bullies are actually people who themselves have low self-esteem. Bullies are people who themselves have problems in their homes with their own parents, and who tend to take out that loss of power or the behavior that they learn at home. They take it out on a weaker person, right? And so, but what does that do to the person who's being bullied? They feel picked on. It erodes their self-esteem, it erodes their self-confidence, and they don't believe in themselves because the bully also uses verbal abuse, and the bully says things to them, right, that makes them feel bad, right? And And it's not just parents and teachers that undermine a child's self-esteem. When children are bullied, the child starts feeling the same thing about themselves that the bully is saying to them, right? That nobody likes you. And the child also starts not liking themselves, right? And also remember, as a bullied child, the bully makes you feel like you don't fit in. And so you're different from me. Being different from me means you're not good enough, right? Maybe you're a different race, maybe you're a different gender, maybe you're even a different religion or even social background. And a lot of the schools of today, with the much more richer schools, children who are like from middle income going to those schools, they go in feeling very inept, feeling that they don't fit in, feeling that people's social standing is far higher than mine, and my parents, don't bring me with the Merc to school. They bring me with, I don't know, a Hyundai i10 or Toyota Jazz, whatever. And my friends are coming in Ferraris and Lamborghinis, and so the child doesn't feel fit in. Doesn't fit in. And what also ends up happening is that the other children notice that, and while it's not a form of bullying, they make fun of you, they exclude you, they make you feel like you don't belong, right? So that can also hamper your ability to develop a good self-confidence or a higher self-confidence, and it contributes to your feelings of worth and your self-esteem. I've mentioned childhood trauma. We know that physical abuse, sexual abuse, all those kinds of abuses impact a child, and it sends a message to the child that the world around them is not safe. No one and nothing can be trusted. You'll find, like, for example, children who've been sexually abused, right? They often have to deal with the fact that people say it's their fault. Why didn't they speak up, right? They get blamed for things that were committed against them. And so you can see through this that the causes of low self-esteem and low self-confidence is rooted in childhood. So counseling and psychotherapy is a useful way of unpacking what are my causes, what are some of the things that contribute to my low self-esteem. And when you go and try and heal deeper wounds around your self-image and how you view the world, you can then start repairing the small child inside, who is wanting only to believe in themselves. And so when you do that and you go to therapy and you visit your inner child and you visit your wounded child, you are able then to address your low self-esteem and self-confidence, right? So in this slide here, I talk about where does the self-confidence come from. We said now it's rooted in childhood, right? But it's not inborn or hereditary. Hence, I said to you in the beginning, I don't buy into that whole biology theory, because if it's not inborn or hereditary, it means it doesn't pass on. But sometimes a mother, for example, let's say she's a single mother, it was an unplanned pregnancy, the father of the child leaves her, she becomes very frustrated with having to deal with this baby because she's had her own plans, and now the boyfriend has left her. She can quite easily take her frustration out on this child, the childhood adverse experiences I was speaking to you earlier about. And this happens quite often, and the child believes, well, if my own mother doesn't love me, how can I love myself, right? The child feels that they were a mistake, and they feel like they're unwanted and unloved. So those kind of scenarios, some people, it resonates with them because they may have done that to their own child, or it was done to them. Now, think about how you learned to walk or ride a bike or even drive a car for the first time. There was so much of nervousness, excessive worry and anxiety. You were worried about making mistakes, but you kept on trying. And you fell off the bike or the skateboard, but you got back up again and again and again, and then eventually until you got it right. In the same way, right, you can build your self-confidence, right? We develop ourselves in spite of our anxiety. You can have the anxiety, it's there. We have good anxiety, it's, neurotic anxiety. All of us have neurotic anxiety about anything, exams or meeting a boy for the first time or a girl's parents for the first time. We all have that kind of anxiety, right? Our self-confidence also, as I said in previous slides, it's influenced by significant others. There are some people who are supposed to be significant, but they've harmed you terribly. And so you have to switch that significance off. And you've got to say to yourself, that person's no longer one of my vitamin people. They're no longer one of my significant people. Because the more you keep that significance light on, the more what they have to say troubles you, right? Also, the other thing is that negative appraisals, whether it's from a lecturer, a previous ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, these things have all been internalized, and they continue to influence our self-confidence, right? You can build, the good news is that you can build your self-confidence again, even though you might have felt that it has broken. And some people will tell you that I was so self-confident in primary school, and then when I got to high school, I don't know what happened, right? Self-confidence isn't restricted to the way you react in certain situations or to how you believe others will perceive you. It's in relation to your own personality, your own thoughts, your own feelings, and the things you actually like about yourself, and it includes the things that you don't like about yourself. All of these things can influence the type of life you lead. Now, I'm not saying you must like everything about yourself. The things you don't like about yourself, make a concerted effort to do something about it. If you're somebody that becomes very nasty, when you're overconfident, then curb yourself. We do get people that are overconfident, right? To the point of them becoming annoying, right? And if you're one of those kinds of people, there's ways for you to do a self-check-in and ask people, am I overdoing it? I'm aware that I tend to do this. I tend to be overconfident. There's nothing wrong with being overconfident. It's when it borders on arrogance, it's a problem. Right? I think this is another slide on where does self-confidence comes from. It also comes from actual experiences. When you've accomplished something and succeeded, you will have the self-confidence, and you'll feel that you could do this task again because you feel successful and you feel positive, and you're energized by what you've done, right? It also comes from our experience of others. If you watch another person perform a task, for example, you may know that you can also do the same thing. So if you watch somebody else, ride a bicycle or go on a skateboard or go on a hoverboard, and you observe them, you think, okay, I can do this, right? Social comparison, when we see others, for example, with similar abilities to perform a task, we may feel more confident in our own ability to perform that same task. Social persuasion, a boost in self-confidence can come from the encouragement of others, especially people that we trust. And then lastly, emotional arousal, this refers to our own inner feeling. Of feeling, that sense of adequacy. Because often, for example, when people are involved in a relationship and the person cheats on them, for example, the person questions themselves, they blame themselves, it results in a lot of shame. It can dent your self-esteem and your self-confidence when you feel inadequate. Lots of people feel sexually inadequate as a result of an affair, right? And most of the time, it's because they didn't know the affair was happening, for example, or it's their own negative self-thought about the why the person left. They won't recognize that it might have been things outside of their control. It might have had nothing to do with them. But what they do is they look first inward on the self, and then they say it must have been me. And the more negative thought that happens, the more inadequate they feel. Right. So I said, yeah, self-confidence can be built, but you need to work on it for it to grow every single day. You can't say today something nice and then for the rest of the month, you don't look at yourself in the mirror, you don't acknowledge anything positive that's happened. It doesn't matter how small it is, right? How is it that some people are completely, they have no confidence at all, right? Because they undermine themselves. When you listen to your inner critic, when you've done a piece of work, and perfectionists do this all the time, when they've done, that's why they procrastinate so much. When you give in a piece of work, and immediately as you press the send button, you might say, oh, they're not going to like it, I'm going to get a low mark. And you start thinking up scenarios about what the other person who's receiving it must be thinking and saying. That's your own stuff. That is your inner critic. It's nothing that the environment is doing to you. It's what you are doing to yourself. So be mindful of that, right? Because your unconscious thoughts, we call them automatic unconscious thoughts. These are the things that lead to you feeling negative or feeling bad about yourself. I even spoke about this in the depression workshop, right? And this can seriously undermine your abilities, right? And if we feel or think we're stupid, usually you think that and then you feel stupid, right? Whether it's stupid, inept, or incompetent, this in turn will lead to your thoughts to your thought process being undermined. You might have these images of yourself failing, or as a failure, or perceive yourself as a failure, and this will be accompanied by, almost uncontrollable, debilitating anxiety. For me, people talk about self-love. I think before that even happens, I mean, that's a very loose term, is the ability to have the compassion for yourself, right? Just want to spend 1 or 2 minutes on the social media and self-esteem. We know very well, I mean, research has shown us that social media, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, what's the other one, Facebook, it doesn't matter what it is. Snapchat was a thing that people used to use in the past also, but these kinds of exposures to other people. Many of us have people on our friends list that we don't even know. They've sent us a friend request, we accept it. Why do we need to have so many people we don't even know? We've never interacted with them in our entire lives. That also has to do with your self-esteem. It's in the beginning when Facebook first started, people wanted to show, look how many friends I have. I have 200. You only have 50, and that became a yardstick for people to show, look who I am, look how great I am because I have 200 friends compared to your 50, right? As human beings, we're social creatures. So it's inevitable that we're going to compare ourselves to others. There's nothing wrong with that. I think if you compare yourself to others, you aspire to be a better version of yourself. There's nothing wrong. That's healthy. But when it gets to a pathological way where you become so consumed by that, that's when it's problematic, right? Remember, what you think leads to negative views and negative perceptions of the self. So the thought process has to be something that you check in on a constant basis. And usually what helps is when you're feeling down or when you're feeling anxious or angry or frustrated, whatever the negative emotion is, tune into yourself and try and remember, okay, where was I? Who was I talking to? What was said? And you might find that something that person said or did reminds you of something, or they triggered something in you, or they said something which you didn't like. And then your mind spiraled out of control and started thinking a whole lot of things, and then you started feeling bad about yourself, right? Did you know that what we see on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter is not a representation of real life? I don't know how many times I've seen people posting their Valentine's gifts and their Valentine's dinner, only to find months later that the relationship has ended or gone sour, right? So how does self-confidence impact you, right? Having a higher self-esteem and a higher self-confidence can improve our projection, right? For me, it's important about your own view of yourself is what you need to focus on, not other people's view of yourself, of you. When you make that the focus, that's the only element that influences your ability to have a high self-confidence, then there's something wrong there, right? Because you can improve your projection, meaning that you can better accept criticism. So when somebody criticizes you, right? Some people can't take criticism. They get really upset. And they take it personally. They don't see it as an opportunity to learn from their mistakes, to improve and be better than before. They take that as a personal slight, and they say, well, I'm really bad, and this person thinks so low of me because I'm so stupid and I can't do anything right. If you look at it in a different way and you say, okay, so what is this person actually saying? Are they doing it to harm me? Are they just a nasty person? So you evaluate the person who is giving you the feedback. If this person is somebody that doesn't like you, has never liked you, and you know this for a fact, then of course they don't form part of one of your significant people. You will turn that button off. But if it's someone that you really have admired for a very long time and you look up to them and you value their opinion, so then you're going to take it and say, what is the value? What is the lesson learned here? Let me accept this criticism. Let me see if I can learn from my mistakes and let me do better. And often you'll find your first draft of an assignment is way better after someone's looked at it and given you, because they want you to perform better. They don't want you to go make yourself a fool, right? Now, the other thing I want you to just keep in mind is that low self-esteem often leads to depression. Not in and of itself. There's obviously a number of factors before this, right? But when you have a negative mindset, it undermines your successes. It also undermines your relationships. And then you are unable to show up as the best version of yourself, right? In some cases, you may not even know what the best self actually looks like, right? For example, when you tolerate toxic relationships for too long and you don't stand up for yourself when you need to. So those kinds of things, when you have a low self-esteem, you will tolerate bad behavior from anybody because you don't know any better. You don't think you're worthy of being treated better, right? Also, people who have low self-esteem, they don't know how to be assertive. They make all kinds of excuses, even if they're asking for something that's owed to them. If it's a book or money that someone owes to them, they don't know how to be assertive, right? You may end your sentences with a question, right? You use qualifying words such as kind of, sort of, and you kind of only take away from what you're actually trying to say. It minimizes it, right? And your discomfort with assertive communication leads you to talk too much. Have you noticed people like that who, when they're so uncomfortable, they talk a lot after someone's made a strong statement, instead of just remaining quiet, reflecting, and then waiting on input from other people? That's usually a sign for you, right? The lack of conviction also leads others to question your thinking. And people then look at you and think, okay, does this person have anything valuable to contribute? They may even see you as someone that's weak, that you don't have much to say. Rather, if you're in a group situation, instead of through your discomfort, saying a whole lot of stuff that's nonsensical, rather sit back, wait, because people with low self-esteem will feel a pressure to speak, because if they don't speak, they think everyone's going to find out that they are unintelligent or they have nothing to contribute. But by talking too much, you're actually doing that, right? Remember, I said earlier on that your lack of self-esteem can have your lack of self-confidence can have a dramatic effect on a negative effect actually on your career. It may even, for some people, it keeps them in a comfort zone. Because staying in a position where there's no risk of failure, you feel safe there, no one's going to test you and expect you to do things outside of your comfort zone, you remain there, right? So you don't actually grow, and your career pathway, there's no trajectory there. It remains stagnant. So this then prevents you from leaving a bad work situation. You wonder how some people stay in certain workplaces for 20 and 30 years, right? Because you're too afraid to apply for a new position. You don't have the self-confidence. With low self-confidence also, you risk losing your motivation, and in turn, this over time will erode your self-esteem. Right? This slide talks to believing that everyone else around you is smarter and more successful than you, right? When you lack self-confidence, you spend more time thinking, more time worrying about what other people are doing, but you fail to focus on your own potential. You also focus on what other people will say. You become obsessed about what other people will think about you, as opposed to focusing on your own competence and potential, right? And this just robs you of your positive energy that you need to fuel your own ambition and to reach your own objectives. So be mindful of that, right? This external focus also validates your sense of feeling that you're not good enough or smart enough to succeed. So be mindful of how you compare yourself to other people. And this is something that people in work situations will know, especially if you've been looking to get a promotion and you have colleagues who, constantly in the boss's face. They will tend to undermine you if you focus on their behavior as opposed to building your own empire and trying to get yourself like, for example, if you focus on them instead of, let's say, getting a short course done or a certificate course done that will elevate you in terms of the next position in the hierarchy, you're actually then undermining your own ambition, and you're not going to get where you want. So how do we build self-confidence? Right. Here's 4 ways you can build self-confidence. I spoke about this earlier on, about how you can actually start something that you have to do every single day. One of those things is called a compliment jar. You know, this is something where for an entire month, every single day, you write down something about yourself. Whether it's your eye color, anything that someone said to you that was positive, just discard the negative stuff. I mean, I don't think we all go through life just getting negative stuff. We do get positive stuff, but watch yourself. When someone says, oh, that's such a lovely scarf, or that's such a beautiful jacket, we tend to play it down and we say, oh, no, this was so cheap. I got it off the sale. Don't say that. Instead, say, thank you. I love the color myself, you know, or I love the style myself. If someone says your eyes are so beautiful, just say thank you. Don't and make excuses about it. Just say thank you, right? And then at the end of the month, if nobody compliments you, that's fine. You will compliment yourself. Every single day you will write something and you'll put it in your compliment jar. At the end of the month, you will then look at your compliment jar. Start living in the now, meaning stop looking over your shoulder, meaning stop looking over in your past, right? Because when you put emphasis, when you look at your past, you're putting emphasis on things that have already happened, things that you have no control over, and things that you cannot change. So start living in the now, right? Keep a journal is another one. When we write, and I say this to a lot of clients, when you write in a journal, you may think, what a futile exercise, but this is a way of getting things out in a very healthy way, because you're cathartic or you're releasing something. And then you can close your journal if you've said something about, I don't know, I'm kind, or I made someone happy today. And that's the other thing about self-confidence and self-esteem. You don't only have to give yourself a compliment. You can do something kind and then compliment yourself about your kindness, right? Whether it's your lunch on your way home from work or school, you can give your apple away because you haven't eaten it, or you can smile at somebody and then say, I'm such a friendly human being. If you nod at somebody, you acknowledge somebody, those are small little things. They may mean nothing, but when they group together, it all helps to build the self-esteem, right? Then ask yourself, if someone else, and this is where self-compassion comes in, if someone else was in my position, would I make them feel negative? Right? When you look objectively at yourself, sometimes you can make yourself feel more positive, right? And ask yourself, what would I say to somebody who had such low self-esteem as me, right? Also, it's important to don't only focus on your weaknesses if you've been doing that up to now. Try to focus on some of your strengths. Look at the things that you have accomplished as opposed to focusing and obsessing about what you haven't accomplished. Right? If it's taken you a long time, if you've changed your degree more than 2 or 3 times, don't focus on the fact that you changed it. Focus on your pathway now. Focus on all the things you're getting right now. The fact that maybe it took all of those things to get you to where you are, right? And maybe all of those things were not meant for you. The other thing that's so important, right? Know what you're good at, right? And focus on those things so that you can improve your self-esteem. If you're not good at something, and if it's something you really want, try to find ways that you can improve on that, whether it's to go for lessons or get someone to teach you, right? Because knowing what you're not good at and then working on it to improve those skills can actually build your self-confidence. Spend time with your vitamin people. Okay, vitamin is good for your body, isn't it? So choose to spend time. Make the people in your circle be people that boost your self-esteem, that want the best for you. And if they are friends of yours, that over the years you've recognized that these people really put me down, or they're always laughing at me and it's a joke, but you go home and you feel bad about yourself, those are people you need to start slowly eliminating. You can still remain friends with them, but it doesn't have to be at the level where it damages your self-esteem, right? And I'm using self-esteem and self-confidence interchangeably because one is beliefs and one is values, and both of those influence each other. Friends can be very, very negative. Maybe they don't want you to succeed because maybe it makes them feel bad about themselves. So for me, it's important that the people who are around you are people that they may not have to, compliment you every single minute of the day, right? But they're not people that are putting you down all the time also. On social media, people that are, maybe don't comment on your posts, they're there. I don't know what they're there to see, maybe what's happening in your life. Unfollow them. You don't need them. If they're not adding any value, you don't need them there, right? And also remember, don't use the number of likes on your social media posts as a yardstick of your likability and of who you are as a person in terms of your worth now, right? I spoke briefly about self-compassion, and I said, what advice would you give yourself if you were speaking to yourself and you were the friend, right? This is a key step to building self-confidence, right? Because it's about recognizing when we are struggling. It's also about reminding ourselves to be kind to ourselves as we would be to another person, and to make a commitment to do whatever we can to improve ourselves. And we know that we can do this by saying to ourselves, one day at a time, one step at a time. It doesn't have to be overnight, right? And believing that, I deserve everything that I desire. Not really, because people may have made you feel your whole life that you don't deserve anything. But it starts with the correct mindset. It starts with you believing that whatever I want, whatever I desire, I deserve that. Other ways of making sure that you don't reinforce your negative your low self-confidence is avoid negative self-talk, right? Rather use more positive self-talk and visual imagery, right? For example, when your boss gives you something to do, or when you get a good remark from the lecturer about a particular assignment, say, I really did a good job there. I know my stuff, I'm really good at, whether it's economics or whatever the subject, English or whatever the subject is. We all have an internal dialogue, right? Because remember, we all talk to ourselves on our way to work, in the taxi, on the bus. Our subconscious doesn't know the difference between what is true and what is reality, right? So, but when we use negative self-talk, our subconscious actually starts to believe whatever you are telling it. Think about that. Your subconscious does not know the difference between truth and reality. And so whatever you're feeding your subconscious, it's going to believe it. So you need to take charge of that mindset where you watch yourself. I talked about the attunement, where you cut yourself off and say, stop that, stop putting yourself down. Whatever the situation is, try and find time in your day to reflect, right? Visual imagery is a nice technique. It's a way of focusing on a positive outcome of something, or even when you imagine what your outcome of a job interview might be, right? Because that, before you go for the interview, do a visual imagery, watch yourself in your mind, walking into the interview room, looking at the panel, smiling, doing the firm handshake, walking with, all of the confidence. And then them asking you questions. Visualize yourself answering all of the questions to the best of your ability. Visualize their faces being happy with the responses they're hearing from you. See their heads nodding as you're speaking and the interest that is shown on their faces. And you'll find what you think is what you're going to attract. So the more positive you think about a situation through the visual imagery, that is what you're going to attract, right? So there's an example that they give, when you swing in a golf club, you can imagine yourself hitting it perfectly, a hole-in-one, right? And this helps with the mental preparation, right? Because that is very important. Preparing yourself mentally for an outcome through this visual imagery. Don't be afraid to take risks, right? Because when you take a risk, it builds your self-confidence. It doesn't, but even if there's a failure, the fact that you are prepared to take the risk, right? You do your homework, do research, find out, okay, what's the consequences of this if I don't take this risk, if I do take this risk, how will it impact me, right? The other one is accomplish. Accomplishing something that's very, very important to you, for example, your degree, right? Or promotion that if you're currently in a work situation. And if you accomplish this also helps to build your self-esteem. Look back at your record. If you're doing honors now, look back at your undergrad. If you are in a junior management position right now, right? image in a senior management post, but also look at yourself before you were in a junior management position. Who were you? Might have been a clerk or might have been a teller at a bank, and now you're in a junior management position. And then give yourself a pat on the back for that, because it took hard work to get into the junior management position. And then that gives you the mental kind of capacity to see yourself accomplishing that, the senior management position, or your honors degree or your master's degree, or whatever it is that you're hoping to achieve, right? And remember, sometimes it involves risk taking in order to accomplish something. And so if you take risks, be mindful that if I want to accomplish anything, it means I'm going to have to take this risk, whatever that risk may be. But like I said, you will do your homework on that, right? Okay, this is a thing that I often find younger people tend to, they struggle with this, right? Remember that none of us who are much more seasoned, our careers were not successfully built in a vacuum, right? In order for us to be better versions of ourselves, we've had to endure getting feedback. There are some people in your life, like I said, who are significant to you, who inspire you, and who you aspire to be like. Those are the people. Get a mentor. If you're somebody that has such a low self-esteem, get yourself a mentor. Speak about the fact that you feel so little confidence when you do certain things. If you're in training, saying, I feel like I have no confidence when I'm doing the training. I know my content, but I don't know this. Your mentor helps you to see, where does the deficit lie? What can you work on so that you can build the self-esteem? For some people, the self-esteem and a confidence issue might come from their childhood. They might have worked through it, but they find now that in a work situation, they're still lacking certain things. Get yourself a mentor, speak to a mentor about some of the weaknesses you have noticed. Your mentor then helps you to, make a concerted effort towards working towards building that deficit or that skill that you so badly need, right? So getting regular feedback on your work is not only for validation that you're on the right path, but so that you can get an objective point of view from like a mentor or a boss that you trust. And that means that you can learn and you can grow and develop and improve your performance. Another thing that I find also helps is a cognitive reframe, right? When you've done something, whether it's a presentation, whether it's training, or whatever you've done, and you think, sure, everybody hated my presentation, I'm never going to measure up to my colleagues, right? A cognitive reframe simply means taking that same experience and looking at it through a different lens, right? So you might say something instead like, I value the feedback from my peers, and I'm really open to receiving feedback so that I can grow professionally or that I can do better the next time. You're not there to only feel sorry for yourself, but really listen to what somebody's saying to you. It's not intended to dent you. Maybe it's rather to improve you and make you the best version of yourself, as I said. So some of the take-home points before we go on to exercise 3. The good news is that we can rewire our brains. Imagine that. You can rewire your brain with focus and intention. Like I said, paying attention to negative self-evaluations and negative, your inner critic and negative self-talk. Remember what I said about the subconscious can't decipher between reality and fantasy or reality, yeah? And when that happens, the brain will take in whatever you say to it. It's going to take it and it's going to internalize it in subconscious, and you're going to act in tandem with that. Practice daily mantras, right? Through your maybe gratitude journal. I think one of my slides is about gratitude here, but you can also have that jar I spoke to you about, right? Do positive self-statements and evaluations about yourself, and make this every single day. Whether it's 5 minutes while you're doing yoga or exercise, say things, because you're rewiring your brain. You're changing the neural pathway. Just like how your brain has a particular neural pathway to negativity every time something goes wrong, you can change and alter that pathway by saying every single day something good about yourself. And it has to be something you believe in. Don't just say something for the sake of saying it, right? And what happens is that over time, the brain starts developing a new neural pathway to more positive things, self-statements, right? And starts viewing the self in a more positive way. So then your brain no longer wants to accept this negative thing that comes out of you when you are talking to yourself. Your brain looks at, how can I view this in a logical and a rational way, as opposed to the illogical, maladaptive way that I've been doing in the past. Your brain will keep you in check, right? Mindfulness and meditation is really important, watching your thoughts without any kind of judgment and just taking it in and reflecting on it and saying, okay, so I've had a bad day today. Things didn't go really well. How could it have been better? And then leaving it at that, not then continuing with the negative self-talk, rather looking at what could I do differently tomorrow? What could I have done differently in that session that I'm going to implement tomorrow, right? Having higher self-esteem and higher self-confidence can improve our projection, meaning we can better accept criticisms from others. We can learn from our mistakes and communicate more effectively, and this results in better human relations at work. And of course, then higher productivity and higher profitability, if you're open to that. And it depends on your own personal and career goals. If you want to be a particular person, that ideal image I spoke about, then when people criticize you, when people give you feedback that you may not be happy with, and that's fine. Not being happy means that it dents your self-esteem, and you can look at it. If you want clarity, say to the person, what is it exactly that you think I did wrong? Where do you think I can improve? Then the other thing to the self-esteem, self-confidence divide is do not labor the point when you go home. Don't let it ruminate in your head over and over. Don't overthink it. Take it for what it is. Look at what you can do with it. And then that means like working on that skill. All right. There we come to part 3 of the exercise. So the first part, I asked you to find 5 words to describe 5 words that other people describe you. When you look at these words, are they the same? Are they negative or are they positive? If they are negative, what steps do you think you can take to improve your self-confidence and self-esteem? Some of the things you could do, as I said, and I've been saying throughout the presentation, is examine your own thought process, specifically the negative thought process. Find the evidence that supports or doesn't support your negative thought process. Rate them, because remember, the thought process becomes beliefs. Other than turning it into negative feelings, it then becomes negative beliefs. Right? It also becomes value judgments against yourself and a maladaptive perception or assumption that you have of yourself. Focus on and then magnify any successes and achievements you have. Change your I statements. I'm stupid, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I'm not attractive, I'm fat. Change those I statements to more positive statements, right? Those of you who were in the depression workshop, would know that I spoke about a concept called radical acceptance, right? Sometimes we can't change the things that have already happened. We have to accept the reality as it is. And that reality can be painful. But the more we try and change it, the more we try and hold on and we prolong our suffering, right? So instead, focus on the things that you can change. So if someone's giving you negative feedback, look at it objectively and say to yourself, what can I change? It's not easy to take negative feedback, but for me, consult with the person and say, you said this, where can I go wrong? And often you'll see that the person, it's coming from a good place. And like I said, if it's coming from a bad place and that person is a toxic person in your life, they're not your vitamin person, you need to just start cutting that person out of your life. Okay. I think I've said some of these, about your strengths and your weaknesses, set small goals, celebrate your successes, adjust your self-image, do the mirror exercise every morning before you leave home. And when you're doing yourself up for work, even if you can't bring yourself to saying, hello, beautiful, bye, beautiful, see you later, you can look at yourself, smile and acknowledge. Maybe the next day you can say something, a word to yourself, and you build that self-confidence up by slowly, step by step, saying things about yourself. Nice color suits you, love the outfit on you, whatever that may be. And like I said, when someone gives you a compliment, don't reject the compliment. Make sure that you are receiving it. And remember, I'm reminded of something. People who are unable to receive a compliment, I recall this once. I was reading about this book called Receiving Love. People who are unable to even receive something as simple as a compliment, are people who have never felt loved, not authentically so. And they feel it's difficult for them to even accept love, because their love might have been there, but it might have been conditional, or it might have been a chaotic or toxic kind of love. So when you give them a compliment, they struggle with that, right? Here's a slide that just talks about some of the mantras for self-confidence, right? You can develop your own ones, right? This one just talks about I'm unstoppable. There's even a song called I'm Unstoppable. I'm responsible for myself. I can create the life of my dreams. I'm worth the extra effort. Can you see how the different I statements move from negative to more positive? I can figure this out. I know what I'm doing. I can find strength in pain. I choose positive thoughts. And even if you just use one of these, I choose positive thoughts, for example, you rewire your brain, right? Remember I talked about that earlier on. Because the more you replace these negative self-statements and indoctrinations with positive ones, your self-concept changes with these changes, right? Yeah, I spoke about gratitude. I said I would mention this, right? When you focus too much on what you want, did you know that the mind creates reasons why you can't have it? I remember I was at a recent training and I was saying, and this worked in the opposite direction for me. I was saying, I don't want to be number one. I don't want to be number one because it meant that our group would have to go up first. And you know what happened? I chose number one from the hat. So I had to go up. So just imagine that, right? So what you say is what you're going to attract. So if you say negative things to yourself, that's what you're going to attract, right? The other thing is that when you focus too much on what you want, right, and then you can't, and your mind says, you're never going to get it. You're never going to get that job. What happens? You then tend to focus only on your weaknesses. You don't focus on all the things you got right in the interview. You focus on all the things you did wrong in the interview. And that is another thing that tends to just, dig deeper into the self-esteem and the self-confidence. And a great strategy to avoid this is by focusing on everything that you are grateful for. Some people actually keep a gratitude journal, right? What are the things I'm grateful that I was shortlisted? I'm grateful that I had the transport to go to the interview. I'm grateful that I was on time for the interview. I was grateful that they gave me 20 minutes of their time and listened to everything that I had to say. So those are the things. And even if you don't get that first job, you don't get the second job, you don't get the 10th job, sometimes you wait for a long, long time. And I myself know that feeling of waiting for a long time. But let me say this, when the time is right, you will get what you've waited for. But each interview you go for example, should be a learning experience of developing a skill of being interviewed. It really builds your self-confidence because you know what to expect. You know what the next thing is going to be, how the interview panel may think. And the more preparation you do because you know what you did wrong the last time, the better candidate you become. And eventually you get to where you want to be, right? Another thing that helps is remember all your past successes. Don't forget that. If you're looking over your shoulder and into the past, remember the positive stuff that has happened. Remember the skills that you have that other people may not have, right? Remember how when you look at a toxic or bad relationship, don't remember just the toxicity. Remember the loving partner that you are. Remember that the fact that you brought maybe kindness and trust into the relationship and a lot of sincerity and nurturing into the relationship, something maybe the other partner didn't bring. But these are pluses, these are positive attributes of yours that you bring into the relationship, and that makes you feel like whoever comes into my life has so much to be grateful for because I bring all of this into the relationship. Don't look at I was so good to him or I was so good to her, I did this and did that, and they never appreciated me, so I'm going to go into the next relationship being spiteful and unkind. Rather look at all of the things that build you as a person, and look at this next person that comes into my life will be so worthy of what I have to offer. Right? Don't be afraid to speak up. In group discussions, often people don't speak up. Now, you may not have a situation here. Maybe you have a church group and you're somebody that's a very quiet member in the team. Make sure that you what you have to say, think about it, and then maybe even write it down. and then pick up your hand and say, I'd like to say this, and this is my contribution. People often don't want to speak up because they feel others will judge them or laugh at them and think they're stupid. But don't let that be something that hampers you, right? Because this fear is not justified. Sometimes people are far more accepting of what we have to say and our viewpoints than what we imagine. Remember what I said about our perceptions and our maladaptive assumptions of what people are thinking and saying about us. We don't fully know that. That's how the self-image is formed, because we don't fully know what other people's views are about ourselves, right? Sometimes the person sitting next to you has the same fear as yours, right? But when you make that effort to speak up, even if it's just once in a while, at every group discussion, each time you see that you become better and better at raising your voice in a public space. And the more you do that, the more confident you will be about sharing your thoughts. And I want to leave you with this last takeaway. What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail?